Hey guys, Derek Check is here with Team Align, and today I wanted to give you guys some wiring tips on your T-Rex 700 helicopter. Several of the tips I'm going to give you during this video are applicable to virtually any model you might own, whether it's a T-Rex or otherwise, so I hope you enjoy the video and find it beneficial. There's two main goals that I have whenever I wire the electronics in my helicopter. I want a relatively neat appearance that does not strain, stress, fray, or otherwise create a situation where the wires might get damaged. And yet I also want the wiring to be functional. So in other words, if I need to disassemble a portion of the helicopter or remove a servo for maintenance or because of a crash or something along those lines, I want to be able to disconnect things and move wiring around without creating a situation where it's very difficult to rewire the helicopter. So I found this setup here that I'm about to go over to work the best on my T-Rex 700 electric. So if we take a look at the lower left corner of the screen here, where I have our tail servo mounted here, I'm going to show you just how I trace this through the frames here. So I have a cutaway section of the frames of a new 700L Dominator kit that I'm building right now, so you guys can actually see everything I did to the wiring right up to the point to where I'm at right now. So if we take a look at the tail servo, you can see I've actually secured it with a little bit of tape down here at the bottom. So this is the 3M 4011 outdoor mounting tape that you can find at Walmart or Home Depot. And I found this stuff to actually work pretty good for holding the wires in some of the odd spots where it might be difficult to put a zip tie or Velcro. I like it because it's easy and quick to apply. It's easy to shape to virtually any configuration you might need on your model, and it actually is pretty sticky and it retains the wire fairly well. I've had the tape last for several months without ever letting the wire let go, so it actually holds it fairly secure in here as long as you have a decent strip length on here. And you can see I've used this right above the frame rail right here to secure the wire, as well as over here and in a few other spots that we'll go over in a little bit. So I like to use the 3M tape just to kind of hold the wire in place so it can't flap out into the battery compartment here in this case, or over on this side, same kind of deal. And I use it in a few other areas to secure the wire as well, such as for the two cyclic servos up here, so that the wires do not fall down into the main gear. So that is one extra bit of retention I like to do. One of the key things when you are using tape to secure the wires is you want to make sure that you're not creating any tension on the tape so that the wire isn't trying to pull itself away from the tape. So I've got a little bit of strain relief right here, just so the tape isn't getting pulled on, so the wire will kind of want to stay stuck against the tape. And you can see here as we continue tracing the tail servo wire that I've actually tucked it underneath the third bearing block here. So you can tuck it in between the bearing block and the rail like so. This keeps the wire hidden inside the frame so you do not see it from the outside, so it looks very neat. It's relatively easy to just position the wires in the spots that I've shown here. So I find this works really well for giving a relatively clean appearance. I've also secured the wire further here with a zip tie and some Velcro. So one of the other things that I always prefer to do when wiring my helicopter is anywhere that I put a zip tie over a wire, regardless of whether it's an electric or a nitro model, is I like to put some Velcro around the wire before putting the zip tie on it. And I found even on the electric models, having the zip tie tight against the wire can cause sometimes some chafing and can damage the wire. Even if your machine is relatively vibe free, you still always have a little bit of vibration on here just from all the rotating parts. So I found this just helps keep the wire in the best condition and eliminates any concern whatsoever of damaging the wire from the zip tie. So I secured the tail servo with this pre-drilled hole here in the airframe for the zip tie, so you don't have to add any holes or anything to secure it right here. So that's pretty much how I've got the tail servo routed at the moment. As you can see here, I have a little extension which you will need if you are using a all-in-one flybarless unit like the Align GPro that I have mounted here, and you wire it in the method that I show right here, as the wire just won't quite reach to the top, as you can see here. This extension here actually comes with the Align kit, so if you are building a 700L as well, you will have this extension in the kit, so you don't have to buy this separately. Just as a little side note. So how I'm going to route this up to the flybarless unit we'll see a little bit later in the video when I get closer to finalizing the wire setup. So now we're going to move over into the two cyclic servos here, and you can see I've employed a similar method of mounting the elevator servo wire here with a piece of tape against the case. And once again, this just keeps the wire positioned so it isn't floating around on the inside here. So I've actually run the wire through the hole that Align has put inside the frame here, and as you can see, it actually has a plastic injection molded directly into the frame. The plastic here keeps the wire protected from getting frayed or chafed or chipped or anything like that against the frame. So Align has that built right into the frame for you in a variety of spots all along the front area where the servos are mounted. So we're using this hole to route the servo wire through, and it then gets placed against a piece of tape under the servo case as I showed you previously. And then the elevator servo wire joins the left cyclic servo wire right here. So that wire we've run underneath this crack here in the frame between the servo case and the top portion of the frame. Once again, there's plastic here to protect the wire from chafing. And I've run that wire down along the back of the case, as you can see right here. And then the two wires themselves are held in place by a piece of the 3M tape under the servo wire here. So I use this to just hold the wires against the servo case, which actually has been pretty well deburred on the edges here, and keeps the wire away from the carbon fiber edge of the frame right here. From there, I have the two wires protected by this piece of the tape located right here in the frame, and it's actually also helping to secure it slightly right before we have another zip tie with some Velcro there. So this basically is the only part of the frame where you'll see the servo wires on the exterior of the frame. And I like to do this just to keep it away from the main shaft, which would otherwise be running right around here. So that just gives it a little more space and protection away from the main shaft in case they were to accidentally move or anything. If we take a look underneath the motor mount, you can see I've routed the wires underneath here, and once again in this area here you can see I've secured them with another piece of tape, again to keep the wires from drooping down into the main gear. And then we route them up to this second spot here for a zip tie. You can see I've got it secured on this side of the frame, and that basically will complete where I'm going to route the servo wires inside the frame right up to the front electronics tray. So in the next segment we're going to come back and I will have the airframe to a point where I'm going to be doing my electronics setup, and I will show you how I'm going to neaten up these wires, plug them in to the Align GPro flybarless unit right here, as well as how the Castle speed controller and motor wires are going to be handled in here. So I'm going to keep going with this, and we'll come back and take a look at what the wiring looks like. One more note here too before I move on. For the other cyclic servo that mounts on this side of the frame right here, I would route the wire virtually identical to the servo on this side. So I would have it come down the side of the case, underneath, outside the frame, secured by the two zip ties, just on the opposing frame half. And then that would run up, right up around here, just like these two wires right here, to go into the GPro. Okay guys, as you can see here, I have the front receiver mount for my helicopter fully wired up, and I just want to step you guys through each component that I have mounted in here. My methodology for wiring the front receiver mount is to keep all the wires for the components mounted on this receiver mount within the receiver mount itself. So I try not to have any of the wires coming out and being secured in the frame or anything like that. And what that does is it makes it easy to service this whole module, as I'll only have to remove the servo leads out of the GPro, unplug my motor leads, and undo the 4 bolts that hold this entire receiver mount in the helicopter, and this whole piece will just pull right out, making maintenance with the speed controller, which I have mounted on the right side of the receiver mount right here. You can see I've used a Velcro strap to secure it on the outside, and I have also used a piece of Velcro on the back side against the receiver mount to help retain it in here. One thing to note, especially if you're using the Castle Edge 160, since the 160 case is a little bit longer than the previous Ice 2, as well as using a little bit larger capacitors than the Ice 2 160 used to use, it can be slightly difficult getting it to seat flush inside of the radio tray. So what I've done to help alleviate this is cut a little bit of the receiver mount away right here with a Dremel tool using a sanding barrel. And what this does is allows the capacitors to fit in here, which lets you sit the ESC flush against the inside of the radio tray, and this just makes the speed controller fit in there much better, and you won't risk damaging your capacitors from vibration or handling or any of that sort of thing. So one tip is to just Dremel away a little bit of the receiver mount using a sanding wheel just to help fit that in there. If we continue on to the other side of the receiver mount, we can take a look at where I've mounted my actual receiver, which is on the bottom here using some Velcro, as well as the wiring from the speed controller. So I've actually placed the S-bus lead as well as some of the excess speed controller wire and the white wire coming off the edge speed controller inside here and tucked it up all neat, as well as moved the ferrite ring to this side. And again, all this was just done just to keep the wiring inside the receiver mount and keep it relatively clean looking while still maintaining its serviceability. And lastly, I guess we'll take a look at the back here where I've pre-positioned a Velcro strap. This is a little bit larger than what it's going to wind up being, but the intent with this is to secure any of the servo wire lead that's a little hanging extra inside the frame will just be held in a bundle right behind the receiver mount inside the frame. So, in a nutshell, this is my wiring setup for my T-Rex 700L. We'll come back and take a look what it finally looks like when it's all done. Okay guys, in this last segment you can see my finalized wiring job here. So I've plugged all my servos in and they're neatly secured down here with that Velcro strap we previously discussed. One addition I've done is I've actually added another strap here just to hold the motor wires together and hold this phase sensor connector against the lead so it doesn't flap up into the motor. But other than that, the wiring here is, as you can see, quite simple. There is really not much to it since most electronics are all contained in the front. So if you can keep everything neat up here, it actually leads to a few wires back here that you would later have to contend with neatening up. So this is basically my wiring setup for a T-Rex 700E. You can apply, as we talked about earlier in the video, some of these tips to virtually any airframe. So if you have any questions about wiring or anything I can help you with, please send me an email at dcheckus1@gmail.com. Thanks for watching.